Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to In the Tone Zone with Billy Trone. This is episode 3. We're going to be talking about recreating the patch that we made last week. Creating a versatile clean tone, something that you can use fingerstyle, slap, whatever techniques you want to use, and can fit into a variety of genres, whether that be pop, rock, R&B, jazz, whatever you guys want to do. As well as a wide variety of distortion sounds, ranging from that full frequency distortion that ranges from all the way in the lows through the highs. Everything's being distorted for doom, hardcore, some thrash, whatever you want to use that kind of thing for, and the more modern split, clean low end, distorted high mids and treble kind of a vibe for modern prog or gent, tech death, whatever you're trying to do. Today we're going to be taking a look at a lot of these sounds with my little pedal board that I have set up here with dark glass distortions and a compressor, as well as my dark glass M900 amp. Let's get into it. All right, as you guys can see here, we've got a close-up of my dark glass Microtubes M900, and everything is set to 12. I like to start with everything flat, as you guys know. So today we're going to just start the same way we did last week. Here's just the DI. I'm going to do my best to not use my onboard active preamp in case any of you guys out there are trying to recreate some of these tones and just have a passive bass, which for distortion I actually really like. But here's just the air quotes direct sound. So it's a little flat, it's a little small. I think the first thing we're going to do is just do a little bit of tone shaping on my middle detent on my pickup blend, so it's both my pickups on full. First thing we're going to do is add in a little bit of low end because we're bass players. So that's starting to sound kind of nice. Let's add some high mids. And the cool thing about the M900 is we have these two EQ selection switches. So I actually have my low mids are scooping 500 hertz and my high mids are scooping 3.5K. Or adjusting, I should say, not necessarily scooping. So now it's starting to get that kind of like glassy top end kind of a thing going on. I'm actually just going to push the volume up a little bit just to hear it a little bit better until it starts clipping. And there it is. That's already sounded a lot nicer. And with that already, just a little bit of high mids, a little bit of low end, just both pickups flat. It's just the character of the amp, my pickups, and my hands, and that's it. And I feel like I could play pretty much any kind of a GB gig, any kind of a pop, rock, jazz, R&B, whatever kind of stuff. If you want to be playing, we'll go to the neck pickup, get some like P kind of a vibe going. If you're playing like Treasure. Like that's a cool, it's got character to it. It doesn't necessarily just sound like a Fender P bass into a Fender bass amp or something like that. You know what I mean? It's or just like an Ampeg or just whatever. It's got kind of a vibe of its own, which is pretty cool. Gonna go back to the middle position. If we're doing like dinner set, maybe I'll scoop some of those low mids, boost the treble just a little bit. If we're playing like dinner set, we want it to just be a nice, almost like an uprighty kind of thing. Maybe I'll pluck right at the fretboard where the fretboard meets the body. kind of thing. If I want to go even further, maybe we'll bring everything but bass back down a little bit, scoop some of the treble. So that's already, it's super versatile. I 90% of the time leave my settings somewhere around here, where the gain's around 12, because on this particular amp, it's really cool the way that the input gain affects not necessarily breakup until you get to 2, 3, 4 o'clock. It really just kind of gives it this beef, this feeling. It's kind of like with tube amplifiers, tube distortion. It's just got this, my dad always called it this sticky kind of a feel, and it's just a level of saturation to a clean tone that just makes it so that it feels like your hands aren't doing any of the work. The amp's doing everything, feels like butter, And that's kind of how I feel pretty much anytime I plug into this. And I'll even push the gain up and bring the master volume down just to get even more of that. And until I start getting that open string breakup, you can use that and it feels awesome. It does start to add a little bit of like a high mid bark to it that I'm not always going for. So keeping it right about 12 is kind of where, to me, it feels really, really good. Sounds and feels great. So the last thing we're going to do before we're done with our clean tone, because now we have this really nice bass kind of a clean tone, good foundation. I'm just going to add in compression, and this is just completely flat input and output. Everything's at 12. The ratio is at 8. The release and the attack are both set to noon. Basically all that's doing, we'll start to adjust it here in just a minute, but that's just everything flat is just giving a little bit of a boost, a little bit more of that sticky feeling like we were just talking about. And the main important thing, I think, for bass specifically, and I play 2 6-string basses, so this is very important for someone like me. I go as far as adjusting my pickups so that the pickups are almost touching the strings, and all the way at the lower end strings, the pickups are significantly farther away, just to give a natural, straight out of the bass, a more balanced feel to it. Because if I set the pickups flat, and have them like Jocko used to have them so that they were almost touching the strings, right? So if I get the pole pieces as close to the strings as possible, the low end strings, what I tune to an A, low E and the low A, are absolutely just monstrous. They are wall-shakingly humongous. And it's awesome, but then you go to play a cool fill, cool lick or whatever, and your lick disappears because that the volume that you turned your amp up to, when you have this monster low end going on, you get to that high end and it's not keeping up, it disappears, So I like to set my pickups so that they're as close to balance as possible. That way I can play these low notes that just like shake the walls. And then at the same time come up, and if I have some cool lick, that's approximately the same volume and is going to come out with the same vigor that these lower strings, there's so much more mass to them. They're so much bigger. There's more metal. The magnets and the pickups are reacting to that more, right? So if out of the box we can get that to be a little bit more cohesive, a little bit more even, that's great. Now I think that's the last thing for our clean tone. I think that sounds great. All right, now that we've got our clean tone pretty much where we want it to be, we've got a very neutral compression on it, which we'll adjust a little bit later. One last thing before we switch over to pedals that I want to look at is the built-in microtubes engine on the M900. Now, not every amp has a built-in, very usable distortion section. I can only think of one or two, but this to me can apply to having multiple distortion pedals, because that's basically what's going on here. And this doesn't necessarily apply to all amps, and it's not necessary. It's just something that I personally really enjoy utilizing. It's part of this wonderful amp that I use, and I like to utilize it for just more versatility. It's just another option, and the more options you have, the more likely you are for success. So we're just going to go ahead and engage the microtubes engine, and let's hear how that sounds. That's already very big. We're just going to turn the main down a little bit. So again, we're just on our middle pickup positions, both pickups on full. The preamp isn't activated at all. First things first, I'm going to balance out the microtubes engine to our actual clean tone. Unlike a lot of guitar tones, I want all of these sounds to be the same volume. They're going to sound different, they're going to have their purpose, but all of them are going to be the same volume. That way on a gig, if I'm switching from these massive distortion sounds to a clean tone or whatever, I'm not going to have, a huge drop off in volume if I take all the extra pedals off. It's nothing like that. So you can already hear that the microtubes engine is way louder, so we're just going to that's a little better. So now as I'm going from my clean tone, and this is all the way on the neck pickup, going from my clean tone to a distorted tone, it's still going to be the same volume, the same, different intensity, but the same volume. Very nice. So the reason that I'm starting with this is I want this to be, basically I want to have 4 different sounds at any given time. And that's going to be my clean tone. It's going to be a very slightly overdriven, very like early 2000s pop punk kind of, just a little bit of added sparkle on top to get that nice like clank, that early Fall Out Boy, Lit, any of those kind of vibes. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring the drive way down, because this isn't really going to be a distortion sound per se. I just want it to amplify some of the more aggressive traits of bass. And that's already kind of doing what I want. So I'll grab the pick. This is that Fall Out Boy tune. Again, we're all the way on the neck pickup. That kind of a thing, right? So it's, again, it's a little flat. It's missing a little bit of something. I'm also going to push the tone up so that everything that's being filtered through this distortion is very, it's a tighter low end, sparklier top end. Now that sounds a little something like this. Without. And with. Let's just go ahead and crank the tone, see how that sounds. Very nice. All that big woofy low end on this low B. It's getting real nice and tightened up just to hear without. It's a little bit more flub to that. Now it's kind of, it's tightened up, it's tamed a little bit. Sounds and feels really nice. I'm going to keep the blend at about halfway. That way, again, just like any other distortion sound that we've done, I want a little bit of that clean low end coming through. And with blend, it's going to be the entirety of the clean tone, not just the low end, but it's still going to be that clean low end coming through to keep some of that beef to it that we want. I'm actually going to push the level just a little bit. There we go. That sounds awesome. Love it. Any of that kind of stuff, any of that like reference that song all the time just because it's great. Good spanky P bass kind of a tone, really, really bright, brand new strings, that kind of a thing. Lots and lots of treble. Just to hear what it sounds like, this is back to the middle detent. This is both pickups. Love that. Great. Sounds awesome. All right. I think that about does it for our clean tone and our light drive, we'll call it. Let's move up to our pedals and get a little bit more specific with our compression and do some more aggressive distortion tones. Okay, so now you guys can see the pedals that we're working with. We've got our compressor that's engaged. All we're going to do is turn the input knob up to about 3 o'clock, turn the master on our amp down a little bit, and that now sounds like this. So that's pretty cool. I dig that. All this is doing is just kind of turning up the saturation, giving a little bit more input gain while keeping everything nice and tame. The highs are popping out a little bit more and the lows are being squashed just a little bit, and that's perfect. So now we're going to turn our microtubes engine on, same settings as we had before, and let's hear how that sounds with the compressor. Again, all that like early 2000s. And that's even a little bit more overdrive than a lot of those tunes had. That being said, the drive's all the way down. We can change, if I really just wanted a spanky clean tone, I'd turn the level up and turn the compressor off. And that sounds a little like this. That's a lot closer to what some of those early records sounded like. So we're going to turn all that back. Bring that back in. So already you can see, the use of compression driving into the front of an amp can push sounds so far. Even just turning that compressor off, adjusting your level so that it's the same volume as your clean tone, you're getting more gain, more overdrive than without it. That being said, you can really see this happen with our targeted overdrive pedals, so the Alpha Omicron and the Microtubes X. With these, I have specific styles that are much more aggressive, something that's a lot less commercial, something more niche, like rock and metal music, that I use these for. Let's start with the Alpha Omicron. Got everything set at noon, none of our little buttons engaged, and that sounds a little something like this. So that's already a pretty cool, very accessible tone. The first thing I'm going to do is I want a little bit more top-end clarity out of that. So we have this awesome little bite switch, and that sounds a little something like this. Very cool. And that's already a tone that I would use. Depending on what I'm doing, I would totally use that for anything that's like a kind of a middle of the road. If I'm doing like a heavy metal gig or something where I'm playing just like Phrygian and flat 6, flat 7, 1 type riffs, metalcore, anything like that. If I'm playing like a Bullet from a Valentine or a Killswitch Engage tribute set or something like that, like that's all over any of that. What's My Last Serenade? Something like that. I love that tune, and that's a bass tone that would work really, really well for anything like that. The way that I would use it more so, though, is like with my thrash band, Intoxicated Rage. I would bring the level down a little bit, leave that bite knob engaged, leave the blend and the mod wheels at noon like they are, and just turn the drive up. And let's make sure that with all that new drive that we didn't have before, let's make sure our level is the same as our clean tone real quick. Actually a little lower, so we can push that just a little bit. A little more. And when I'm dialing in distortions, for whatever reason, there is one particular riff from a song called Kill the King that I like to use. It's all on the low string, but it ranges from really low to pretty high. So I get to hear how the distortion is transferring over different frequencies. And it goes a little something like this. So already, I get to hear how multiple notes, all that clank, how it sounds with a pick, ranging through frequencies, through different octaves. Love it. Sounds great. If I'm doing something that's a little bit more aggressive, I'm going to punch in this growl knob, and I'm actually going to spin the mod wheel all the way over to the Omega side, which is a much more full frequency, a lot more low ends getting distorted, and it's just massive. And that sounds a little something like this. And that's just huge and messy and awesome. And now just to top it all off, I'll pull the level down just a little bit because the Omega side is so big that it's a little bit louder than the Alpha or a blend of the Alpha and the Omega. So I'm going to swap all the way to my neck pickup, bring the level down just a little bit, and now that sounds like... And that's just brutal and disgusting and awesome, and I love it. I might use that kind of a thing for like a hardcore band or something like Doom. But but it's a little bit much with, half step down tuned guitars. All our tunes are in E flat. Tyler plays the 7-string. So I like to kind of leave a little bit of space for the boys. And back to how I normally would use this pedal. Sounds a little something. And once again, just double checking that our clean tone's the same. Sounds pretty good. And now I'll even throw in the microtubes engine just to get a little bit more something something. And that just, to me, it just kind of tightens up the low end so I can use a little bit more aggression. I can pick a little bit harder and break it up a little more. But it also gives a little bit more of a different mid-range that's being distorted. The Alpha Omicron, where it is right now with a blend of the Alpha and the Omega, has certain mid-ranges that are being scooped or being distorted. And the microtubes, the B3K circuit, distorts a completely different side. It sounds different. So blending those two together gives you a whole new sound that neither of the pedals separately would. So that's kind of my main go-to. If you come see Intoxicated Rage live, that's kind of the tone. Very aggressive and just huge, so we dig that a lot. Moving on to the microtubes. This I'm going to use a lot more for any of the prog stuff, any of the tech death stuff, anything that I need something that's a little bit more modern, a little bit more tame, but still super aggressive and fits what I'm trying to do. And most of the time, I'm going to set this up. Everything's set to noon right now, and that sounds a little like this. So to me, that's much more aggressive. It's I like to think of the type of distortion as very chainsaw-esque. It's like a buzz saw. So I'm going to use this for anything that's more proggy, going into that gent kind of territory. I'd probably use this. I'm going to swap back to both of my pickups. First thing I'm going to do is we have these two little knobs, and they select how much clean low end is coming through the pedal and what area of frequencies are being distorted. And you can come all the way from, where the distortion starts, I should say. And you can come all the way down to 100 hertz. So you can already hear that clean low end is in there. And there's a ton of frequencies being distorted. So if I pull that all the way up, we're now starting at 1K. So now that's a little bit closer to how I would use it. That's, I'm going to turn the drive up to about 2 or 3 o'clock. We're going to leave the level where it is. We're going to pull this mid knob just a little bit. So that's just a really nice, tight kind of distortion. If I want to, I'll pull the distortion where that starts, that down to what I would say about 800, 850 hertz kind of a thing. Just to get a little more saturation. I'm actually going to push the level up just a little bit because here's our clean tone. Yeah, we're crushing. So I'm going to push the level up a little bit. Pull it back down just a little bit. And that's about where I would set that. You know, we've got a nice mix of lows and highs, a good amount of drive, pulling a little bit of the mids down so it's not super aggressive. And now let's engage the microtubes engine just for that same kind of a thing. So now that's a lot of mids being scooped. So I'm actually going to swap over to the Vintage Ultra type of sound. So now we have this really, really nice clean low end, a really pushed mid-range, and this just chainsaw-esque distortion that's crushing everything. So that's super cool. And then back to the B3K. And those are both sounds that I would absolutely use anytime. All right, guys. Well, that about does it for this week. Episode 3 of the Tone Zone. Already 3 weeks in. It's super cool. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing my personal process going over how I go through creating a good clean tone for gigs, whether that's, you know, if I'm doing a wedding, I'm playing everything from pop to rock to jazz to R&B, disco, everything. And that clean, I think, will do just fine, if I do say so myself. And a wide variety of distortion sounds from just the B3K circuit that's in the M900 itself, for that slightly overdriven kind of spanky top end, sort of an early 2000s pop punk vibe, which I really dig. And then full on distortion sounds from the Alpha Omega full frequency kind of a distortion, where everything from the lows all the way to the highs are being distorted, and getting that like hardcore, some thrash, definitely doom kind of vibes, almost a fuzz sort of a feel. And using the Microtubes X pedal for that split, clean low end, distorted high mids and treble kind of a vibe for tech death, modern thrash, prog, gent, any of that kind of stuff you want to do. Thanks again, guys. Tune in next week for episode 4 in the Tone Zone with Billy Trone. Have a good one.